Okay, so today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different, and then I'm going to be going unscripted. This isn't going to be a video essay like I would normally do, which is, I spend a lot of time writing an actual script and editing and everything like that. I just really wanted to speak about, the ousting of Bob Chapek and the reinstatement of Bob Iger, which is a pretty surprising and interesting turn of events that I did not expect would happen. A week before that happened, I actually produced a video talking about how, or highlighting how, Disney was really burning consumer trust, and I thought that would lead to an eventual drop-off in Disney consumers in a way that the company just wasn't anticipating. So if you're here, I'm kind of assuming that you watched that video already and that you have a sense of what I've already covered. So if you haven't seen that video before watching this, I highly recommend doing so because I'm going to be working off of that. So again, this isn't a structured video essay because I didn't have the time to produce one, and I'm just going to be going through some notes and bullet points that I've written down here. And also because I haven't done this before, you're going to probably hear some weird audio cuts, and it's going to be a little unrefined. This is my first time experimenting with this format. So I'm just going to be talking and probably adding some my B-roll of the parks over what I'm speaking about. And it won't necessarily match the context of what I'm speaking about, but I'm just going to throw it out there just so you have something to look at while you listen to me. So moving forward, I've been predicting for a while that Disney has been sailing into dangerous waters, and I anticipated that they would see some form of consumer backlash. This would probably result in Chapek leaving the company once his contract was up, but even having it been renewed recently, I think he was at least set to stay with the company until 2025. So that's what makes his, sudden ousting so just shocking, because it was so unpredictable. When I found out the other night, I actually thought that it was a joke at first, but then the more I continued seeing it, the more I realized, this is actually happening. This is insane and unpredictable. At this point in time, there's still a lot of information coming out about this, so we don't really have that clear of a picture, and it's possible that we won't even have one for a while. As in, maybe even a few years from now. But it is really interesting because there's a lot of juicy corporate drama going on right now, in a way that really reminds me of how Eisner was, previously ousted from the company. So, we have little tidbits here and there, which I'll discuss a little bit of, but in general, we still don't have that clear picture. So we know that Chapek was highly disliked by cast members, but this push to oust him was reportedly partially orchestrated by CFO Christine McCarthy. If you don't know who she is, she was the person who received a lot of flack for making those comments a while ago about reducing portion sizes, to save people's waistlines. And, obviously, A, that's a disgusting off-color thing to say, and B, it's a transparently bad joke about wanting to cut, portion sizes just to save on costs and, further squeeze consumers in the Disney parks. So in my opinion, McCarthy is a huge part of the problem, and I don't think that she should be staying with the company. I think that she should be part of the shakeup. But she apparently was a big proponent of removing him from the company because she thought that he would end up using her as a scapegoat for the, less than stellar recent earnings report. There also seems to be a rumor that there was a rebellion against Chapek from the studio heads because a lot of their power was taken away from them as he consolidated all of the creative and financial decisions under Kareem Daniel. One positive I would say about Iger was that he let his creatives be creative, and I think that, Kevin Feige with Marvel Studios really exemplifies, why that was a good decision. And of course it has its downsides as well, as with Kathleen Kennedy and Star Wars and, the whole debacle of the sequel trilogy and just how poorly planned out all of it was and just how those movies were pure nostalgia bait and little actual engaging storytelling. And, I don't really need to go into that, but because, you know what I mean. So that was a bit of a double-edged sword there. But Chapek really consolidated all of these decisions under Daniel so that he could micromanage every single aspect of the studios. Chapek loved to talk about how Disney had the best creatives out of any company and the best storytellers, and yet he wanted to micromanage them down to every single last detail. So I think it's also quite telling that as one of his first public moves, Iger has now fired Kareem and is attempting to restore that creative and financial power to their different studios. At this point in time, I don't think that we have a clear scope of the issues caused by Chapek within the company, despite how public many of these were, because it's clear that things were quite desperate if he was just suddenly ousted without warning, and Iger was the person that they brought back. If you've been following me and watching my videos, you know that I blamed Iger for a lot of the creative issues within the parks, so I'm not exactly a fan. I see him as the root of many of the issues we're currently seeing, and while the company will be far better off without Chapek, having Iger back on just isn't very reassuring to me. The transition to away from FastPass Plus into Disney Genie was something that Iger had a hand in, or if he didn't, at the very least he gave his stamp of approval for its implementation. He also oversaw many of the price increases and declining park quality long before Chapek ever became CEO, or even head of, parks and resorts for that matter. Also, this pivot towards cheap, superficial IP theming in the parks started with Iger as well. So I'm clearly not a fan, but I will admit that I'm breathing a sigh of relief now that Chapek has absolutely zero influence on the company anymore. Perhaps even a shakeup as large as this can limit Iger's influence because it seems clear that he's only obligated to stick around for the next 2 years. His return to the company is clearly intended to help return consumer and investor confidence, but to also identify talent and essentially train the next CEO. Now, who will that person be? Well, at this point it's not really clear, but it will be interesting to see how things turn out. So from this point, let's ask, what do we think will change, or at least what do I think will change under Iger? So this can be, I'd say, a bit difficult. As he left, it seemed like Disney Plus was a huge part of the company's future, but it's also clear that as the market has become oversaturated with streaming services, which, to be fair, is kind of Iger's fault as well, because these other companies had to push their own streaming services in order to feel like they were competing. So among all that, it's going to be difficult to achieve profitability, even though Disney has some of the best, streaming numbers out of any of the other services. The reason that this is an issue is because within the last year, investors have really soured on the streaming industry and have abandoned subscriber growth as a metric for success. So it will be interesting to see how Disney handles this going forward. Will they keep spending such obscene sums of money to really try to drive subscriptions, especially among all the Fox debt that they still have to pay off, in addition to the huge stake in Hulu that they're actually going to have to purchase from Comcast in 2024? I think that they are legally obligated to purchase that. I'm not sure how Iger can really dig Disney out of this hole, because once Disney Plus does become profitable, they're still going to need to continue spending large sums of money to keep subscribers. Maybe it was a mistake to push the industry towards streaming, because as much as I think that it is the future, this is something that both Disney and all the other companies out there will need to continue spending money on, and I'm not sure if they know that they will see a good return on investment from that. So with the pivot towards streaming, as well as declining ticket sales in theaters because of, the 2020 shutdown, because at this point, theaters haven't even really recovered from that, because I think that consumer behavior has changed in how people view movies. I think they have pivoted towards streaming. All of this with a looming recession, it seems that the entertainment and theater industry are still in the process of a pretty dramatic shakeup. So it's going to be interesting to see how, streaming shapes the future and how studios, including Disney, will need to adapt to that to remain profitable alongside theatrical releases. There's so much change going on right now that's difficult to really get a clear pulse on what the future of this will be. So it's just going to be interesting to continue watching. Changing the subject and going towards the park side of things, first I want to say that I think that Disney Genie is here to stay. at a time with such low profits, I don't think that Disney is going to throw away this as a revenue source. However, with that being said, I wouldn't be surprised to see Genie change into something that's more standard across the industry. Because, if you go to Universal and purchase Express Pass, or Six Flags and purchase Flash Pass, or Fastlane at Cedar Fair parks, the industry standard is to charge a really high price, much higher than the ticket price often. But you also get a lot more flexibility, and because it's so highly priced, you're pricing out so many people that your standby lines continue moving. If you want to spend or splurge an obscene sum of money on these skip the line passes, you can do so, but it doesn't really come at the expense of the experience of people in the standby lines, which again is the industry standard. Now, of course, this isn't perfect, because if you've ever gone to Halloween Horror Nights and used Express there, you can still be waiting 30-40 minutes just to go through a house. And of course, as crowded as that is, that definitely backs up the standby lines for that as well. So again, not perfect, but it's definitely a better system than Disney Genie currently, using that low price point to make it almost feel necessary to even have a good time in the parks. And it's, designed to be predatory. And of course, when so many people purchase it, you're not really getting much value out of it because all of those reservation times have already been taken up by other people. So imagine, that Disney Genie goes or changes form into something like you have to pay $200 a person per day, but you can take your Magic Band and just go up to any ride you want, scan it, and you instantly get in. I think that would actually be a positive development because you'd be pricing out a lot of people and keeping those standby lines moving. But for the people who do pay for it, they're getting a lot more flexibility and a lot more freedom. One of the issues with Disney Genie, in addition to all the other issues I highlighted, is that it has you, running back and forth between different areas of the park because you're so limited with what you can grab that you can't really, make a circle of the park, or any of their parks rather, but you have to actually, say, okay, now we have to return to this time and go all the way to Space Mountain. And then you have a return time for Big Thunder Mountain later in the day, so then you have to run all the way across the park again. It's just, it's just a really bad system. So, we could perhaps see that change. I think it's a possibility. So something that I think will change is the possible removal of the reservation system. I'm skeptical that the reservation system actually ever saved Disney that much money, because it was all about using consumer data to then staff the parks to the bare minimum, or to staff their eating not staff their eating establishments, but to order the minimal amount of food needed to feed the projected park goers that you would have that day. It's not like previous to the reservation system that Disney didn't have data to accurately predict these things. So is it worth, really maximizing profits at the expense of consumer trust and of the, park experience for park goers? I don't really think so. And it's, this is a deeply unpopular system, and I wouldn't be surprised to see this go away under Iger, within the next year or so. The third point I would like to move on to is that I think Disney's still going to be in a bad place when Epic Universe opens. Disney has so much debt from Fox and the future Hulu stake that they'll have to buy from Comcast that I don't think that they can really afford to greenlight new ambitious projects to compete with Universal, and I don't think that they need to compete with Universal. Now, of course, if you're here, you probably know my opinion. You know that I think that Universal's new park is going to change the entertainment landscape of Orlando. I think that, with all the new subpar additions that Disney has been transforming their parks with over the last, 5 or 6 years, I just don't think that they can compete with Universal's new park and the way it will change people's perceptions about Universal as a multi-day destination. As a recession continues to slowly encroach on us, when it finally really hits, people are going to be spending less on vacations. And so they have the option of either A, going to a Disney park that they didn't have a good experience at last time, or B, checking out, this new exciting Universal Park with stuff like Super Nintendo World, Universal Monsters, etc., that, may seem a lot more appealing. Regardless of Iger returning to the company and sort of reinvigorating that consumer trust, a lot of people have still been burned on the park experience that they've been having lately. So there's a good chance that, when money gets tight, they still may consider Universal's new park over Disney. Now, I don't think that Disney will ever truly be in financial trouble with their parks, but I think that they won't kind of reach the same heights that we've been seeing over the last decade or so, because Universal's competition is going to get a lot stronger. And it seems weird to me that, Disney executives are ignoring this. They don't really want to make any sort of meaningful investment in their parks because they think that they are untouchable. But I disagree. I think that consumers will flock to Universal, and of course people still come to Disney, and Disney will make plenty of profit in its parks, but they're not making, the sort of insane profits that they are now. And I think that they're stupid to throw that away. Okay, so to wrap up my thoughts, I don't think that I've had a lot of strong or solid points, because these are just some loose notes, but hopefully I've illustrated my skepticism for a near-term positive future for the company. Iger was called in to fix, many of these issues that were made significantly worse under Chapek, but it really started under his own leadership. And on top of this, with the recession pretty close on the horizon, I think that Iger is very much going to be working hard over the next few years to dig the company out of this hole, rather than making meaningful investments. Even as Chapek has left, the Disney parks have still left a bad taste in the mouth of many consumers, and if a recession hits at the right time, people vacationing on a tighter budget are very possibly going to be considering between, a damaged Disney Parks product and a new high-quality Universal Park that they may not have ever considered before. And once Universal becomes a viable multi-day destination resort, it may be difficult to bring back, former Disney loyalists. So I'm not really sure if people have really sort of enjoyed this format. It's definitely a little bit different. But I would be interested in your feedback, and I would like to know if you want to continue seeing stuff like this, or if I should just return to the normal, very structured, typical video essay that I would normally do. So, to kind of conclude things here, if you want to go ahead and give me a like, that would also be pretty helpful, and if you haven't subscribed already, I recommend doing that as well.